Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Judy Weisbart, and I am... That's pretty cool, actually. Thanks. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm really glad you're all here. So many of you are friends from the World Business Academy and personal friends and community leaders, and I'm so grateful that you have all come and that you're all going to listen to something very inspiring and I think really very conscious, and hopefully allow us to teach you something and you'll ask questions and teach us something. Before this evening begins, I'd like to thank the El Encanto, who is our partner in this wonderful experience. Sean, our manager, is standing back there. So just so those of you who found us in the newspaper and have come for tonight only, I just want to explain that we are trying to build a community of conscious citizens who really want to change our community in a conscious way. And by doing so, the World Business Academy has partnered with the El Encanto, and we do monthly meetings in this room, or in smaller rooms if there aren't this many people. And what we do with that is we are very much interested in hearing from community, in creating community, and in supporting nonprofits throughout our community. So if anyone is giving to a nonprofit at the level of $300 a month, you want to come
talk about the 101?
Oh, we're going to discuss that now, Charles. Anyone who is giving at the level of $300 per year to any nonprofit in this community, we would like them to become partners with us, and we would like to make available some amazing experiences at the El Encanto and ways that you can join this Global Citizens Club. We can discuss it later. There's information on it. That is my only ad for this evening. Now that I've said all the things I'm supposed to say, I believe, I want to do something that I did last month, and I think tonight more than ever it's really important. I'd like to take just a couple of seconds, really, of you all sitting in silence with your eyes closed, taking a deep breath and coming into this room, being present and being aware that we live in a community that is hurting and that needs all of us to support and love one another and to bring together each and every one of us so that we can change for the betterment of our community, our society, and our world. Take a deep breath for those who we have lost and those who have lost so much. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce you to a friend, someone who I have known since he was young. He's still pretty young, but someone who has been involved in our community since he's been on city council and has gone to the assembly and is now our first district supervisor. Das Williams has been a lot in this community and continues to be, and is a conscious member of our political process. I'm also very honored that he put me on the Women's Commission, so I'm a commissioner for him, and I will always be grateful for that. After Das says a few words, he does have to leave for another meeting, so we put him at the front of the program. But after that, I'd like to introduce Jina, and Jina is going to speak to us a little bit. She is from the Glendon Association. She is here this evening to talk about the Santa Barbara Response Network, and is training responders for them. She is dedicated to something which I love the answer to, which is psychological first aid. Right now, so many people in this community need psychological first aid, and she'll tell us a little bit about that after Das comes up and welcomes us and then leaves. So it'll be Das and then Jina. I'll speak to you in a few moments. Thank you.
Well, it's really an honor to be able to kick off this event, and sorry that I have to go for another disaster preparedness meeting, this time in Carpinteria, because so many of our meetings have been about or in Montecito. Of course, Carpinteria, by only a hairbreadth of better luck and planning by clearing out debris basins, et cetera, escaped the same fate, and of course remains in the same level of danger in the future. So we're doing that tonight. But I will be adequately represented by Jen Cregar over here, who is our county energy czar. I forget your exact title, but Czarina. I want to speak a little bit about some of the things that we can do if we really want to be a sustainable and resilient community moving forward. And I'll talk about two non-energy related ones first, but ones that definitely have to do with our air quality and climate change. One is, as people are doing extensive amount of work, just clearing the county debris basins was 60,000 truck trips, okay? There's at least as much material, if not more, on private land. And it will not be done as efficiently on private land as it was with FEMA and flood control. And so we could be facing another 100,000 truck trips on the road or more if everybody tries to move all of that mud. And I want to just throw out the question, does all of it need to be moved, right? In many cases, that additional 5 feet is either 5 feet of additional sandbags that is there waiting for you, or is 5 feet of additional height if your building was destroyed and you rebuild. 5 feet of additional resilience. For 5,000 years of human history, cities, probably longer than that, simply build on top of destruction like this, and they do it for a rational reason, which is that they're higher, they're more resilient, and stronger. It's only the last 100 years that we've kind of thought, well, maybe we can just get rid of all this stuff and be more resilient. Secondly, we need to be thinking about, as we rebuild, building farther away from the creeks. We need to structure our planning policies to enable people to build farther away from their creeks. And in some cases, we as a community need to rally around places that are deemed not safe to rebuild and try to acquire them for the resilience of the community. Open space around creeks can make all of the parcels safer, particularly if you can do some restoration of those creek channels and enlargement of those creek channels to pre-development widths. It's something that is improving the safety in the city of Santa Barbara through the Lower Mission Creek Flood Control Project. It's something that can be accomplished much more rapidly in Montecito if the community rallies around the idea that we need some actual public land in Montecito. And of course, the last is the question of energy. The numbers, final numbers aren't out there yet, but I submit to you, once we look at how much diesel fuel was used to take care of the disaster, the reality will come to us of how much of a dirty energy project this community has been, particularly in the last few months during the disasters. Because when these lines go down, they have brought in more and more diesel generators so that we can keep the lights on. And our air quality has suffered, but I think more importantly than that, our values have suffered, right? Our pretension that we are a leader on the environment, I think, is really open to serious questioning, right? Because most other communities in this state have wrestled with energy questions and are building renewable energy. The south coast of Santa Barbara County the birthplace of the environmental movement, is one of the few places in the state that has had no utility scale renewable development. Zero. None. We got a 0 next to our name. And that is something that I would argue not only for practicality's sake but that's enough of a question in and of itself, but for value's sake, that's not something we can allow to continue, right? It undermines our message throughout the state. Craig can tell you when we try to lobby in Sacramento for these values, it hurts us when people in other parts of the state view us as people who talk about it but not build it. We must build it. Of course, if we don't build it, we're going to get a natural gas power plant thrust upon our community. And that's, I know what we're going to talk a lot more about tonight. If we do not build really, at least collectively, between many different parcels or on a few parcels, really a utility scale amount of renewable energy, that is, 95 megawatts, we will, in all likelihood, have a natural gas peaker plant put in our area. The irony, of course, from the perspective of some folks in this community, is some folks think it would be easier to put a natural gas power plant in this community than to build enough renewables to take care of the problem. And that's something we should go, wait a minute, something is wrong if political observers and developers of energy think it's easier to put a natural gas power plant in Santa Barbara than it is to put a lot of solar and batteries in Santa Barbara County. And so, to me, we've got to realize that we've got to do it right here. We've got to do it on our parking lots. We've got to do it in the right kind of even open spaces. Because if we do not, the consequences for our environment will be dramatic. But I also believe that the one thing that's powerful about Santa Barbara is look around this room. I mean, I think a lot of folks, know people in this community. Just the people in this room, there's a tremendous amount of talent, treasure, and will. If we as a community don't let it be acceptable to not be a leader on the environment, then we can change that. And so I'm pretty inspired to be able to kick off the conversation tonight. Jefferson from my colleague Joan Hartman's office right there in back will give me a good report on how the rest of the night goes. And can we give Joan a hand, because Joan's been an incredible partner on energy and the Board of Supervisors. We can get it done, folks. Let's start it tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doss. Doss has been a partner in our work for years, so we've worked closely together on other traumatic events in our community. I'm Jina Carvalho, and I'm here tonight to talk about the Santa Barbara Response Network, which is a grassroots organization made of volunteers. We're an all-volunteer run, responding with psychological first aid, which I'll tell you exactly what that is. And what we do is we're invited in by family members, churches, schools, any entity that has experienced a trauma. It can be a suicide, a shooting, a natural disaster. And our volunteers will go out and be with that person, that family. We can go to the memorials and be present. We were at the vigil that DOS put on. And we are there to offer compassionate support to enable recovery, resilience, and to offset PTSD. Everyone in this room has been impacted. And I'm very touched that the World Business Academy invited me here to talk about mental wellness and spiritual wellness in the aftermath of what we've all experienced. We're all traumatized. We're either first degree, second degree, whatever degree, we're hurting. We were terrified. We are grieving. And our children are scared. And what we did, the Santa Barbara Response Network with a collective, I brought a page along. We are not doing this alone. We are a mental wellness team that's been formed, including the Red Cross, County Behavioral Wellness, Cottage Hospital, the pastoral, all of the clergy, Hospice of Santa Barbara. The list goes on and on and on. We meet once a week and we look at what the needs are and we form responses. And we go into the schools, we go into churches, wherever there's a need. The Santa Barbara Response Network started 9 years ago when we had what's called a cluster or a contagion of suicide in our community. And we brought in, through the Glendon Association where I work, we helped found the Santa Barbara Response Network. We brought in an expert on suicide contagion, and he trained us and about 135 community members to offer psychological first aid. Psychological first aid is an evidence-based response that is the most effective right after a traumatic incident. There are 7 stages or steps to psychological first aid. We offer trainings on a regular basis, and if you want to get involved, I brought brochures. You can email me and be trained so you can be a responder. You can help. And it's basically 7 very basic steps for being with a person who's in pain and hurting. And it's extremely rewarding. After 9 years, we have responded to the Isla Vista shootings, the 2 family murders that have happened, the runaway truck on 154, remember that? I mean, pretty well every incidence of shootings and suicides and homicides we've responded to in one way or another. We respond in the Latino community. We have a very strong Latino part, and this community trusts us, and we're able to do a lot of work with the DACA, some of the immigration issues we've had. We've been able to support those children and those families. So basically, we're a volunteer team that's able to go out. You can access us. I brought a brochure on self-care, which is really important, and you can take that with you. And I just want to say that we're in the midst of healing, and this is an incredibly supportive community. And there are resources for you, free on a sliding scale, and I have lists of therapists, Reiki, acupuncture, all kinds of people that can help. So feel free to reach out to me. And thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you, Jina. I think we all really appreciated that. And now, to start this evening is an introduction to someone who really doesn't need to be introduced to this group, but I have to do it anyway. My dear friend and the founder and president of the World Business Academy, Rinaldo Brutoco. Rinaldo, as many of you know, created this amazing think tank, which has now become the action incubator that you sit in at this moment. We have been blessed by being given a focus on business being responsible for the whole. We are responsible for the whole, and Rinaldo Brutoco has shown that in his critical work over many, many years. It is his vision that we can have a global citizens club that will change our community and the world. It is his vision that we, as Santa Barbarans, become the first city in California to actually be a microgrid city. He's been talking about this for the 4 years that I've been involved in this organization, and I think today more than ever, his vision and his determination is obvious. So I would like to introduce you all to my friend, I guess my boss, and a truly remarkable soul, my friend, Rinaldo Brutoco.
You know, Judy, it takes a little of the spark out of when you say my boss. Everybody was believing you up until that point. So just a couple of quick things to launch off. First of all, this is a joint venture with the El Encanto and the Academy. We actually created this about 3-4 months ago. We started talking about a year ago. And it was a sad fortuity that the launch month was today. This is their first launch meeting of what we hope will be second one, yeah. But it's in the context of the Montecito. And the question that arose for this activity was, you've heard the adage, think globally, act locally. And I want to thank Michael Weitzman back there somewhere, because I thought your poster was coming tonight and it didn't get here, but it'll be here next time, or about the New Athens. And I gave a speech that Michael liked on the New Athens, we can be like the New Athens in the age of Pericles. And how you do that is when God gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So we've had a whole lot of lemons dropped on us, boulder-sized lemons. And the idea for tonight was to see if we could stimulate a conversation which will go on in the months to follow. The ground rules for belonging to this club, the Global Citizens Club is what we're calling it, is very simple. If you donate $300 a year to any one of the affiliated nonprofits in town, welcome. Not only do you get to come to these meetings, which we'd love to have you come to, you'll get significant discounts, 15% on all your food and beverage here at the El Encanto, spa discounts, and other reasons to be grateful, because the El Encanto wants to demonstrate that it's grateful that you're giving to your community and you're engaged. So you don't have to belong to the Academy. You can belong to Human Rights Watch, which is one of our affiliated charities. You can belong to Jina's group, SBRN, and a number of others that have already decided to join with us. And our goal doing this is to make it so that everybody who cares enough to do a little bit financially for this, whatever charity they like here, whatever nonprofit, we have a lot of great nonprofits in this town. You can come to this meeting and you can become this new class of global citizens, these people who want to be like Athens in the age of Pericles, the golden age of Athens. And to do that, we have to tackle all of our local challenges. I'm sorry, I've been a friend of Das for many years, and I only want to beg to differ with one thing he said. There will never be a fossil fuel peaker plant in Santa Barbara, California, period. Count on it. It won't exist. My good friend and partner, Craig Lewis, and I fought off the one in Puente with a remarkable victory. If you haven't heard this one, this is the first time I've ever heard in the state of California where the State Energy Commission basically vetoed the PUC and said, no, you won't put that peaker plant back in Oxnard, which, as some of you know, we've been fighting for 3.5 years. We won the Elwood peaker plant case at the PUC about 2 months earlier. So we're not going to sleep. 4 years ago, we did a thing, and if anybody wants to see this, there's a really 20-minute TED Talk I did in Sacramento not too long ago, last November, on the California Moonshot Initiative, which is simply this. We can get to 100% green energy in the state of California within 10 years or less at no additional cost to the ratepayers. Pretty simple. All we have to do is choose to get there. In response, in furtherance of that plan, we took on 3 things that we think, as local citizens, we had to stop. One, our neighbors in Oxnard, who are being forced to put a 35-year fossil fuel plant on their beach, and as many of you came down in buses to Oxnard to testify at that hearing, and my personal testimony was, you wouldn't do that to where the white people live. Because Oxnard is a 73% community of color. You just wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do it in Santa Barbara, you wouldn't do it in Ventura. We were able to, after a period of 3.5 years of fighting that for the people in Oxnard, that peaker plant has been stopped. The peaker plant in Elwood, which is one of the least fortunate areas financially in the Santa Barbara area, that peaker plant has been stopped permanently. And no peaker plant's going to be built because it's insane. It is more expensive. It makes no sense environmentally. It's inconsistent, as Doss said, with our values. And so tonight we thought, okay, we got these boulder-sized lemons. What's the lemonade? And the lemonade I hope you're going to enjoy hearing about tonight is if we choose to rebuild Montecito the way we would have built it if the town was in the year 1950, 1910, we'll make all the same mistakes that era created. Or we can choose to rebuild Montecito, the people of Montecito, in something that looks like 2018 and beyond. So what you're going to hear tonight, particularly when I introduce Craig in a few moments, you're going to be hearing about our blueprint, and you're going to see it up on a board, for how we can create more energy locally than we possibly could use. Doss used a statistic. He said 250 megawatts. He said 95 megawatts. We've given a plan to the PUC to produce 250 megawatts. And that happens to be equal to all of the energy we consume at the peak demand between the cities of Ventura and Goleta. And as it turns out, it's not tough. And as the Energy Commission recently observed, with that much photovoltaic and storage, which is economically viable today, you don't need peaker plants. And you have something that is what we've been talking about now for 3 years: Santa Barbara, renewable, resilient, and reliable. We should not be in a situation, and I thought that we're going to have a graphic that actually, we'll pass it out to you later. Anybody who wants the video, let us know at the Academy. We'll get it for you on what the moonshot is. We'll also be happy to show you the graphic. And Montecito is facing an enormous challenge. How will it get mortgages to rebuild in the areas that are designated as red, which is a zone that's going to be very difficult to get a mortgage in, but even the yellow zones, which really aren't about people dying. It's about, are you going to lose your electricity if there's another event? Are you going to lose your water or your power or your, et cetera? And so what we want to do is tackle these issues and demonstrate that you can actually create a community, Montecito, Santa Barbara, which creates all of its own energy and uses it locally, and will have it available whenever the crisis strikes. Remember, all of us are now still living under the threat of those main transmission lines that bring those 250 megawatts to us. Those transmission lines will go down. Edison says so, and they own them. You should take them at their word. We've been speaking to this issue for 3 years. It's time for us to realize we need to get resilient. So I'd like to just close with this thought before I introduce our first speaker. And the thought is this: if you look at the possibilities that are in front of us today, and you say, gee, could we rebuild not just Montecito, but create a prototype, a template of what it would look if we did it right? What would it look like? Then all of a sudden it starts to create other avenues and possibilities and opportunities. I've had conversations with the president of the PUC directly in his office about the fact that we should have an exemption in Santa Barbara because we are the most dangerously poised community in California for an instantaneous cutoff of electricity. And all of you remember what happened the first days of the fire when we kept losing power. So I'd like to just share with you that the World Business Academy, now in its 30th year, is happy to think globally, because most of our stuff happens around the world, but to act locally and to convene these meetings with each of all of you. And I'm hopeful that what we're going to end up seeing is an engagement of citizens, people, who say, you know what, if not me, who? And if not now, when? And with that, if we can take that attitude, I believe we'll be able to reconstruct not just what we had, but something far better. The city of Irvine had a minor crisis, used the opportunity to put in a gray water system. So today, there's a dual pipeline in Irvine. One is the black water, so-called, and one is gray water, your shower, your dishwasher, your sinks. And that's how they water their plants. We're not going to talk about the gray water system that's possible today, but that gray water system would be underground, which should not have been affected by what just happened, particularly if we build. Number two, an electrical system, which doesn't have to be up in the air. Look at Puerto Rico. If they rebuild the system they just had, it's going to blow down in the next hurricane, and one's coming. So let's use this opportunity to rethink, if we're as smart as we think we are, and we certainly have the resources, is there a way to do this where we can rely on each other and create something better than existed before all these lemons hit us? That, to me, would be lemonade. So thank you for coming tonight. And next month, the issue we're going to be tackling, tell your friends, is what to do about retail on Coast Village Road in downtown Santa Barbara. That's going to be next month. Now, a copy of this video will be available for free. We're intentionally cutting it, so many people who couldn't be here tonight will have an opportunity to share what you will share. We're going to have a panel discussion following the presentations, so please jump in. This is a bilateral process. With that, I want to introduce our first speaker, Charles Newman. Has been a stalwart guy with the community. He belongs to Social Venture Partners, which automatically says he cares. In fact, that's where we first met, I believe, was SVP. And we handed out these bios for you, so I don't have to read all this stuff. What's important is Charles is trying to do what I'm asking everybody in the room to do and to tell your friends to do. Get involved. Become a citizen advocate. Be willing to put the time in to help, as Charles has, as a resident on the Montecito Finance, Water and Supply, legal committees, the CEC that he's involved in. I see John Steed back there from the CEC. Let's get involved and let's listen to what Charles thinks we can do potentially to turn these lemons into lemonade. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having this program and even more so for inviting me to participate. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to literally try to bring the message home. And by that I mean, what can homeowners do individually with respect to their personal properties, their homes, to address the issue, which is certainly before us, of resilience. And the subtext of that is not just residential resilience, but going beyond like for like. And I'm going to explain what that phrase means in just a moment. This is what I think is a wonderful, wonderful quote that's really grabbed me, which is, you never let a serious crisis, go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. And that's from Rahm Emanuel. Great quote, I think something for us to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to speak tonight from the perspective of a planner, and I must say at the beginning, while I serve on the Montecito Planning Commission at DAS's pleasure, I'm speaking tonight individually, just with my own thoughts, my own ideas. I'm just one of 5 on that commission. So let's start with planning and development, and as it's probably known by many of you, everybody has the right, generally speaking, to replace a seriously damaged or destroyed structure with a like structure. That's provided for in our code. And it's made simple. A planning permit isn't required if the footprint, the size, the location, and so on are the same as a prior structure. And there's a 10% rule that's added to that. You can have 10% more or less footage, gross area, and so on. A zoning permit is not required, and there's very limited design review. And I'm told, as was the case during the T-Fire, that it's going to be an expedited process for permits and review. Now, there are a couple of exceptions, which is if you're in the coastal zone, if you have a proposal to build something dissimilar to what you did, or you have an accessory building of any kind on your property that you're going to rebuild and so on, then more review is required. And for any property that is going to be rebuilt, you're going to need to get a building permit, and compliance is going to be required with the 2016 building code. So those are the general requirements. Now, let's talk about the properties impacted. This is as of a week ago, the last tally we had from the County Planning and Development Commission indicated the following. There were 590 properties that were impacted. 240 of those were red tagged. I happen to have 2 of those properties on my building. Fortunately, they're ancillary buildings, but 241 are red tagged, which means that they are not habitable properties. They're unsafe for occupancy or use. 151 were yellow tagged, meaning that there can be only limited access and use until the damage is remediated. And 198 of the properties were green tagged, which meant that there was not serious structural or other damage. So let's talk a little bit about resiliency and design. There are obvious and important aspects to resiliency in designing residential properties. And of course, 2 of those elements include fire and earthquake or seismic. Those are really presently well addressed in the current code. But I must say that resilience with respect to other climate change perils is not as comprehensively addressed or known and could well be inadequate. So let's talk about some of the things that we need to address in that context. Passive features in design, be it, for instance, double glazed windows or the like, and resiliency that we're going to talk more about has a wonderful collateral benefit, which is greater sustainability. It means a greener home. It means less energy is used. It means a more viable property. But there's something new here. The equation and the calculus has changed because what happened here is really very different from anything that's happened before in our community, and there are very material differences between mud and debris flow from other climate perils we've experienced, notably fire. So as an example, there's greater impact on infrastructure. As Doss and everybody's alluded, we know what happened with respect to power, with respect to water, gas, and the like. There have been very dramatically radical changes in topography and landscape. I toured some properties where for instance, creek bed that was 80 yards was now 200 yards wide, where the property adjacent to it wasn't only part of the creek bed now, but the creek bed was 30 or 40 feet lower than it had been. There are, of course, lasting changes to the direction and to the expanse of water courses. And additionally, there are properties that have been partially or wholly just unbuildable, no question about it. There's greater difficulty and a longer time incurred to remodel, to rebuild, whether it's like for like or otherwise. And there's challenging policy and legal issues. As an example, what's the impact of having a property, as I do and maybe some of you do as well, that is now designated to be in the extreme hazard debris flow zone? Lucky me. What is that going to mean? It's going to have an impact, of course, as this incident did, on real estate values, on real estate taxes and revenues to our county, and perhaps to the insurability of the property as well. Serious, lasting ramifications. And very interestingly, there are complex and vexing intergovernmental relations here. As an example, FEMA is the basic authority with respect to flood control. And it is going to remap our area and designate new and different flood zones. FEMA is one authority. Of course, our county, Montecito being an unincorporated, non-governed entity other than by the county, is going to play a key role in what happens in Montecito. And then, of course, we also have the state and the feds. So I just want to pose to you some kind of what-ifs. I want us to imagine what's possible, what might happen, and throw out some provocative ideas that may not fly, but they're worthy of consideration, I think. So first, of course, we need to know and figure out what are going to be the minimum floodplain elevations. Can that house be rebuilt on the same level that it was? What if the Santa Barbara County had the funds available to it to purchase and compensate owners for those properties that are not buildable or not safely buildable? Imagine if flood control and planning for that was done not on a property-by-property basis, but on a neighborhood basis. Let me bring that home. I had 68 loads of mud taken off my property so far, and a landscape architect and an architect told me how I could defend my property from the common enemy or peril of water or mud. But if I do that, my neighbor gets screwed. I don't want to do that. So if my neighbors and we could all sit down collaboratively and say, what's the best way for us to defend our properties collectively, come up with a common solution that benefits all of us the most, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? So I want us to think imaginatively. This is pretty provocative. There are some areas in Montecito that are no longer suitable for single-family homes to be built. What if instead we built 2- or 3-story multifamily condominiums, apartments even, in Montecito? I'd like to... You heard it here. How are we going to encourage people to do these things to their properties, to make them not what they were, but to make them better? Well, one idea that comes to mind is for us to obtain tax abatement for the resilient portion of a home rebuild or improvement. So, by example, if somebody's home is destroyed, it's going to cost $2 million to rebuild it. $300,000 would make it a resilient building against climate change perils. Why not give tax abatement for 10 years or some period for the $300,000 portion of that? So, bottom line, there are some tools, there are some things, there are creativity to be brought to it, but what it depends for it to happen is some thinking out of the box, an extraordinary amount of cooperation and collaboration, and the will to turn our desires into a better future. I hope we can do that.
Our next speaker tonight, and again, we're going to keep these presentations short so that you'll have a chance to interact with the panel. So Jen Cregar, as you heard earlier, was the czarina, incorrectly identified as the czar, the czarina of local energy at the county level. She works, as many of us got involved with her, I think, through the CCA project, and I know her portfolio is broader than that. We asked her to come tonight because we think that this particular meeting we're having tonight, which is about resilience in the electrical world, and then how do we keep this thing. I'll tell you quick, some of you may know Chuck Zagar, who lives in Montecito. He's a friend of mine, a fellow of the Academy, and he stayed at his home. The mud didn't hit him, it went around him. And I said, Chuck, are you okay? I called him on his cell phone. He said, yeah, I got a lot of junk food, I got a lot of bottled water, and I got enough pool water, I can flush my toilets, everything but electricity. And I said, well, how are you talking to me on your cell phone? He said, oh, I charge it off my car battery. Now, what's funny about that story is Chuck was in the process of putting in a completely resilient photovoltaic system for his house. Didn't get it all done, so he was caught without. What we are hoping we will get the cooperation from the county to do is to think outside the box and to help us create something that's basically local and resilient. And we're hoping that Jen can help us do that at the county level. So Jen, and you've got her bio again in front of you. Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm recovering from a sinus infection, so apologies for the raspy voice. I'm also going to sit. I don't have a ton of energy right now, so bear with me. If you can't see or need clarification, feel free to raise a hand, and I can go up to the podium if that's better. So first of all, thank you so much to everybody for being here this evening, and to the World Business Academy for putting on a really phenomenal event, an opportunity for all of us to come out and have real conversations about the community that we want to have going forward. I know that many are eager to start the rebuilding process and to do so smartly and with energy resiliency and the environment in mind. Fortunately, it's not common that communities have an opportunity to think from a more open slate and to design strategically and intelligently with kind of future implications in mind. So, I would just echo that rebuilding wisely is certainly critical, as unfortunately we are likely to continue to see more natural disasters like the fire and the debris flow that we've just experienced. I am part of a 7-person sustainability division. I have my colleagues Ashley Watkins and Marissa Hansen-Lopez here with me this evening. And a lot of the work that we do centers around trying to reduce the carbon dioxide and the other greenhouse gas pollutants that contribute to climate change. That while we can't tie any one specific natural disaster, such as we just had, to climate change, it certainly is a contributing factor to the more holistic changes that we're seeing in our local weather and global climatic patterns. So a lot of what we're focused on is trying to reduce the urgency with which climate change is coming. And as a county, we're also starting to prepare for the ramifications of the fact that climate change is not just coming, but it's here, as we've all witnessed. So now is a great time to be having this conversation about what we can do to not just rebuild our community, but specifically focusing in this evening and leading up to Craig's presentation about how we can rebuild our electric infrastructure to better withstand the next emergency event. I'm not resentful of that, I promise. And to minimize our contribution of climate pollutants that contribute to climate change. So I do have a couple of existing county projects that are underway that I think tie into the concept of building a community scale microgrid here in the Montecito area or other places potentially throughout the county. But before I do so, I wanted to share a little bit about our sustainability division, kind of who we are, what we're doing, and why we do it, to give you a little bit of context. So as I mentioned, we're a team of 7 sustainability experts. We collaborate across all different county departments, as well as with our partner local government agencies and other nonprofits and community partners throughout the county and across our Tri-County region with San Luis Obispo and Ventura counties as well. And our focus is really to provide resources that empower and connect people to enhance the environment and our quality of life. So in line with what this talk is all about this evening, we hope to inspire and to really facilitate individuals and organizations taking collective action to create a healthier and more environmentally vibrant local and regional community. Our work currently falls into 3 main categories: energy efficiency, clean energy, and climate action. So energy efficiency is where we got started. We have a residential energy efficiency program called Empower Central Coast. There might be some opportunities there in the wake of the recent fire and debris flow to potentially partner with our electric utilities that serve the area, Southern California Edison here in South County and Pacific Gas and Electric Company in the northern parts of the county. What we do is we essentially provide wraparound services to single-family homeowners to upgrade the energy efficiency of their homes through, for example, adding weatherization or sealing around gaps and cracks around windows and doors, adding more efficient appliances, and things of that nature. And I know that our peers up in Sonoma County that unfortunately faced a similar disaster in their community not long before us, they were able to work with PG&E that serves their region to bump up the rebates and incentives that they offer to individuals to, when they are doing their repairs and they are rebuilding, that they're installing more efficient appliances and equipment. So that's something that we're potentially interested in pursuing as well. We're also trying to grow beyond just energy efficiency for single-family homeowners, but also to enter into the businesses and nonprofits and others that are interested in making their organizations and their properties more energy efficient. And we're partnering, as I mentioned earlier, with Ventura and San Luis Obispo counties to try to create a new type of energy efficiency organization called a regional energy network that would allow us to do more with other funding sources independent of the utilities. In the clean energy space, as was mentioned, we have been investigating the prospects of a community choice aggregation, our community choice energy program here for our region that would provide more local control over where we get our electricity supply, potentially from more local clean energy sources, and have some more say in how much those electricity sources cost us. Initiative that kind of spun out of the community choice energy effort is that we are now, the county is partnering with 3 of our cities here on the South Coast, Carpinteria, Goleta, and Santa Barbara, to look at potentially laying the foundation for a broader clean energy roadmap for the county and the South Coast as a whole. So that potentially could tie into this evening's discussion, as microgrids are one way to facilitate the development of more clean energy resources like solar and battery storage and things of that nature. And then lastly, we are the division within the county organization that's responsible for helping to implement our climate action plan. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail in just a moment. But I just want to stress that the type of microgrid project that Craig will be talking about momentarily is really the perfect example of the type of collaborative multi-partner projects that our division is well suited for and is hoping to spark an interest in and momentum behind in the community. That said, any of the concepts or ideas talked about tonight, I cannot speak on behalf of the county. These ideas would need to be vetted through our policymakers, through the Board of Supervisors. So if you have an interest in getting involved, I'm happy to talk more about it, and maybe there's something that we can bring together. So I guess I'll transition into how a microgrid concept really ties nicely into 2 of those initiatives that I mentioned already, our Energy and Climate Action Plan and the strategic energy planning work that we're starting to do. So starting with the Energy and Climate Action Plan, it's essentially a comprehensive guide for how the county and the community as a whole are going to drive down our greenhouse gas emissions, trying to get those to a 15% reduction by 2020. So that Energy and Climate Action Plan was adopted by our Board of Supervisors in 2015. At the time, it was in line with where the state was trying to head at the state level. Since then, the state legislature has adopted more aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets, so we'll be needing to update our Climate Action Plan in line with those deeper savings over time. But for now, we're focused on the 2020 goal of reducing those emissions by 15%. What the Energy and Climate Action Plan does, it identifies the specific actions that the county as a government organization and all of us as members of the community can take to be responsible for the things that we do, driving, turning on the lights, turning on the faucets, sending trash to the landfill, that create those greenhouse gases that contribute to climate change, which exacerbate our natural disasters here. I will highlight that it is a mitigation plan, meaning it's trying to identify the things that we can do now to try to slow the encroachment of climate change on our community. It is not an adaptation or a resiliency plan. That said, the county as a whole, we're starting to identify kind of areas of vulnerability within our infrastructure and within the services that we offer that are already being impacted, like we have seen front and center over the past few months, by the effects of climate change. So, for example, our planning department, they have been working collaboratively across the South Coast region to develop a coastal resiliency plan to prepare for the impacts of rising sea levels. And then the county also recently partnered with our regional transportation planning body, which is the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, on a grant from the state to do a really deep dive to look at the vulnerabilities of our transportation system, again, as we all witnessed with the shutdown of the 101 and the ongoing rebuilding of all the bridges over the 192. So we're really going to take a hard look at where those critical spots are and then hopefully address those over time as policy and funding sources are identified. I will say that related to the Climate Action Plan now, the vast majority, 75% of all of our carbon emissions in the county of Santa Barbara come from both transportation and building energy use. Those 2 sectors of the economy are ripe for improvements with microgrids. So you can integrate electric vehicle charging infrastructure so that we can try to drive down the emissions from our vehicle driving. We can try to install more clean renewable energy resources that are facilitated by this connected microgrid. So while microgrids aren't directly called out as an emissions reduction strategy in our Energy and Climate Action Plan, they certainly do help with future grid resiliency and support some of the measures about increasing the amount of renewable energy generated locally and maximizing opportunities for energy efficiency improvements. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was just the strategic energy planning initiative that we've recently undertaken. So we're in the process of hiring a consultant right now to help us with two things. One is that Southern California Edison is well aware of the fact that we have some grid issues here on the South Coast and that we are very vulnerable to emergency events. So they, within the next couple of weeks, probably the next week, will be issuing a request for proposals for project developers that are interested in offering up what is called distributed energy resources. So anything that doesn't necessarily have to be connected to the larger electrical grid and can help build a little bit of a buffer in emergency events for us. So the county, along with Carpinteria, Goleta, and Santa Barbara, we're pursuing the possibility of bringing on a consultant to help us identify projects that we could do both with our public facilities and to facilitate development of those projects in the private sector to participate in Edison's RFP. We're also hoping to build out a more robust clean energy roadmap, again, that could incorporate microgrids for the county as a whole. So those are the kind of primary initiatives that the county is working on that I wanted to bring to your attention and really just highlight the fact that, you know, as traumatic and difficult as recent events have been, this is kind of a blessing in the sense that this is an opportunity to think strategically and to think smartly about the community that we want to build and to facilitate into the future. Thank you.
So these little brochures that some of you have seen, the SBR3, that stands for, again, Santa Barbara Renewable, Resilient, and Reliable. And just to let you know, SBR3 program in 2017 was successful in consulting on over $1 million of individual solarizing projects here in town, and over, I think, $600,000 actually got built out within less than 9 months. So it's a service that the Academy as a nonprofit provides to help, and at no cost to the individual homeowner or building owner. It's a service we provide to try and help them get what they're looking for, which is this resilient target. I also want to point out that our next speaker, Craig Lewis, is actually getting quite famous in the state of California. I'm delighted, grateful he's our partner here. We worked together on the Moore Park initiative, which is to try and get 250 megawatts approved to be able to be locally based rather than through Edison, and we're hopeful that will continue to yield good results, and so far it's working. We worked together very closely on the Puente Peaker plant, which, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to stop. And we'll be talking not only with Craig, with other people. We'll be bringing, and there'll be a meeting on this probably in about 4 months. We're going to be bringing a cryptocurrency to the area called a solar currency. And what it is actually, it's the first cryptocurrency that's based on the generation of photons into electrons. And we'll be bringing you some information about how you can all participate in that. And so there's ways that you can even stimulate and profit from people solarizing their homes and their buildings. I was asked earlier tonight about our ongoing battle to finalize the closure of Diablo Canyon, and I'm not going to take time tonight to do that, but after the meeting's over, if people would like to get an update, I will be happy to provide that. So with no more further ado, I'd like to invite our partner, Craig Lewis, who's going to be talking about this plan that we're proposing. I want to also say that CEC has already endorsed it. So I'm very pleased that we're going to put something together that's not only viable, but that the community is already starting to respond to. Craig Lewis.
I think I will go with the podium mic here. Judy got us started with a moment of silence, which was really, really nice. And I want to take a gesture of appreciation for Rinaldo. I met Rinaldo for the first time about 5 years ago and have gotten to know him, over that time period, but have really got to know him more so over the last year. And every time I meet with him and talk with Rinaldo, I learn more that I just appreciate so much. And last night was a big one. We had dinner last night. We thought it was going to be about an hour. We were there for about 3 hours. And he's one of the most altruistic, determined, creative, generous, and fun people that I have ever met. And to top it all off, he's fun. I enjoyed our entire time having dinner. So just join me in thanking Rinaldo for. I also just want to call out a couple other people in the room that have a lot to do with everything that I'm going to be presenting tonight. Robert Perry, who works at the World Business Academy. Just raise your hand, Robert, so people know who you are. We've got Michael Chiacos from the Santa Barbara Community Environmental Council. And we've got Mike Weissman. Mike, let me just say, just before you give him applause, he is the person who wrote the check to give us seed funding to make everything you're going to see tonight possible, so that we get this whole project started. So, Mike, thank you. And finally, and then I promise I'll get started, I just want to, one of the people that's really helping to bridge the Clean Coalition and the World Business Academy is Matt Renner. Matt is now with the Clean Coalition because he lives up north where the Clean Coalition is actually headquartered up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And Matt is now with the Clean Coalition and has just been a tremendous force for us. But he, as most of you might know, he was previously with the World Business Academy and obviously is just a great bridge between the two organizations. So, Matt, thank you. So without further ado, I am here to talk about the Montecito Community Microgrid. And this is all about renewables-driven resilience for the critical facilities that are in a certain section of Montecito. You know, if we had enough money and enough time and energy and enough political will, we could do this across all of Montecito. We could do it all across, Santa Barbara County. But we've got to start, small and get that first bite-sized piece done. And let everybody see how to do this, and then we grow it from there. A lot of people may not be familiar with the Clean Coalition. I will say that we are headquartered up in Northern California. We do a lot of work across California and across the country. We are a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to accelerate the transition to renewable energy, primarily local renewable energy, and a modern grid. You've got to modernize the grid if you're going to get renewables to any significant penetration level of the energy mix. So those two things go hand in hand. And I will just say that I am moving to Santa Barbara. I grew up in Santa Barbara, and I am moving back to Santa Barbara. I spent my whole lifetime after I moved away for college, spent the rest of my lifetime trying to get back here, and finally going to happen. And part of that's with the help of Rinaldo. He's really helped me set up a couple of things that were really important to get down here. And again, part of my appreciation for everything he does. Let me just start off. What is a community microgrid? A community microgrid really is a new way to design and operate the electric grid. And it's designing it and operating it in a way that you can get lots of local renewable energy stacked into the distribution grid. And by the way, distribution grid versus transmission grid. Rule of thumb, if you see wood power poles, it's distribution grid. It's where you're close to where people live and work. If you see steel power poles, it's transmission grid. It's kind of going out over the mountaintops. Everything that the Clean Coalition does is really focused on the distribution grid. It's right in the load pockets where people live and work. And community microgrids are basically taking big chunks of the distribution grid and getting lots of local renewables in there, and then using energy storage and demand response and some other techniques and technologies to make sure that all of those assets are coordinated and can provide economic, environmental, and resilience benefits in a way that central generation, whether it's renewables or fossil or nuclear, whatever, could never provide the type of resilience that local renewables can. And community microgrids really enable local renewables. And they do it in a way that's very replicable. So once we get, say, the Montecito community microgrid that you're going to see, we get this, we can extend it across all of Montecito, all of Southern California Edison service territory, and we can also take that exact same design and we can plop it into other utilities. We can plop it into PG&E's service territory and utilities across the country or across the world. So very replicable. The key stakeholders in the community microgrid are the property owners, really critical. So for the folks who are property owners in this room, or property owners that are good places to site solar on their parking lots or their rooftops, we need to hear about them, and we need your help in helping those property owners make sure their properties come to play, and also to make sure that the community is not, kind of up in arms, like, hey, we don't want to look at solar on somebody's roof. It's like, Kate, that's a really outdated way of viewing the world. We need solar on people's roofs. The utility is really critical. Matt and I will be down at Southern California Edison all day Thursday. We've got multiple meetings across the Southern California Edison organization to really help make sure that they're going to be a partner in the Montecito community microgrid. They're critical to making it happen. The municipalities, obviously, Jen Cregar, her team, and the people in the various city municipalities that she mentioned, critical to making this happen. The solution providers and the financiers are all obviously very important too. So this is a picture of Montecito. Montecito is actually a census-defined place, a CDP, and it's defined by the tan-covered area. Obviously, Montecito, people, think of it bigger than that, right? Pieces of what's part of Santa Barbara City are also, would be considered part of Montecito, like the Montecito Country Club, for example. By the name, you would obviously just expect that that's part of the Montecito area. And so it's a little bit bigger than this. What we see on this slide is basically where we've identified the biggest concentrations of solar siting opportunity across the Montecito area. So all of those icons on there, and we'll zoom in a little bit so you'll see it better, but you can see that it shows up in clusters where there's opportunity for siting solar. The Montecito community microgrid that we've identified is really concentrated between the Montecito Country Club, the Vaughn's Shopping Center, the Coast Village Strip, and then you go down to where the Four Seasons and the Coral Casino are, and then you come across the shoreline there and you come over to the Academy of the West, the Montecito Sanitary District, and then you go a little bit further over near the Bird Refuge. You've got a event center and a athletic club, right? So all of that whole area is what we've identified as a perfect opportunity for doing a Montecito community microgrid. So let's tell you another reason why this teal-colored feeder line, it's called the Hot Springs feeder. That feeder connects all of those properties that I just mentioned. So same feeder, it makes for a perfect opportunity to tie all those properties together electrically. This is a block diagram of all of those sites that I mentioned, and it kind of simplifies what that feeder circuit looks like. That entire feeder is served out of the Santa Barbara substation, which is over near the Funk Zone, and then that feeder comes all the way out and basically serves this portion of Montecito. Like I said, because it is electrically connected, we've got a perfect opportunity to tie these properties together in a community microgrid. So community microgrid, if the bigger grid goes down, you can isolate all these little pink plus signs. They're basically switches. So you can switch off and isolate from the substation, which basically connects you to the transmission grid and kind of the larger grid out there. And then you can switch off your non-critical customers. You can make sure that your solar and your energy storage are reserved for your critical facilities. What are the critical facilities here? They're the places that you're going to get your food. They're the places you're going to get your water. They're the places that you're going to shelter. If the proverbial shit really hits the fan, right? You need a place to go. And these locations, there's lots of places to actually go and shelter. Obviously, Vaughn's, you've got food, you've got refrigeration. The CVS, you've got pharmaceuticals. The Academy of the West, the Four Seasons, you've got places you can actually go and get provisions. You can go and shelter if you really need to. I know it might sound a little bit morbid, but the cemetery is a big space. I mean, if you have if you absolutely need a place to go, you're going to go there. If that's where people are setting up, right? Well, hopefully go there and leave when you're ready to go home or whatever. Montecito Country Club, a lot of space there. So this is what we're envisioning for the Montecito community microgrid. That solar siting survey we did for all of Montecito came up with a little over 11 megawatts of total solar siting opportunity, And about 40% of it, a little over 40% of it, is in what we've identified here as the Montecito Community Microgrid. So if you look at all of Montecito, almost half of the solar siting opportunity is in what we've identified as the Montecito Community Microgrid. And about 90% of it is on parking lots. So for people who are nervous about, solar on rooftops, well, I got some good news for you, because most of this solar opportunity is actually on parking lots, and hopefully people can get over, a solar parking canopy, and actually it provides shade to your car, and it helps you, protect from other rain and other things. So lots of solar siting opportunity, mostly on parking lots. So this just drills down into the various opportunities. This is the Vons cluster right here. We've got almost a megawatt of solar siting opportunity there. This is the Coast Village Strip. And basically we've got about 1.3 megawatts of solar siting opportunity here, almost all of it on parking lots, and a tremendous amount of it on these parking areas that are right here along the 101. They're actually, they're serving the Coast Village Strip shops and whatnot, but it's right here, and I believe that is either city, I think it's city property. City? Yes. Yeah, great. Right, so the city, they want lots of local renewables, bring your properties, right? This is the Four Seasons Coral Casino. This is the Academy of the West, lots of solar siting opportunity there, especially out here on its parking lot. The Montecito Sanitary District. This is the little part of the cemetery. This is Ty Warner's property. So if Ty Warner owns the Montecito Country Club, the Four Seasons, and the Coral Casino, hey, Ty, we'll tie your house in the Montecito Community Microgrid if you play with your other big properties that we really want. So we've got a little extra enticement for him. This is the event center and community center, athletic club area over by this is the Bird Refuge Water right here. So this is right there. And then here's the Montecito Country Club kind of large view, zeroing in on where the solar siting opportunity is here at the Montecito Country Club. We've got two parking lots, right, one right here, one right here. That's where all the solar siting opportunity is at the Montecito Country Club. This is a project that we helped bring to life up in San Francisco. It's in the Mission District of San Francisco. It's the highest density of urban solar in the entire city of San Francisco. This solar's been in place for a number of years. Right now, we are tying energy storage together with this project. It's on the PG&E side of the meter, so it's called wholesale distributed generation energy storage, and it's a really beautiful thing. And I say this is a peek at the community microgrid future, because right now it's just solar, but when we get the batteries there, it's going to be a community microgrid. And this is an apartment complex that is for seniors and for disadvantaged communities, low-income folks. And this is a community that you want to be able to shelter in place. They're not super mobile. They can't move to an emergency shelter, right? So now we've got an opportunity for solar and energy storage to provide shelter-in-place opportunities for a very vulnerable population. And it's going to look exactly the same once you add the energy storage. Right, so this is a peek at the community microgrid future, because what you need and what's visible is the solar, but the energy storage is going to be there, and so is the ability to coordinate all of these assets. And this is my last slide, so yeah, thank you for your attention.
So we're going to try and get you out of here on time. I'm going to ask for any questions or comments. If you have a question, please keep it brief so others can get in. And if you have any comments. And we've got a second live mic. Michael Weitzman, you definitely deserve to ask the first question or make a comment. And thank you for seating this, Michael.
I'm really glad to have been able to kick off this project. It's just the kind of thing we need. It's the kind of thing I've been looking to sponsor. And I'm really pleased with the progress that I see. I mean, it's only been a few weeks, and Craig and his team has developed all these maps. They've put everything in place. We've got the CEC involved and engaging the politicians and property owners. So I'm just really glad at the progress. My question is, can you say a bit about how everything comes together? I'm an engineer. So I'm interested in what are the components that need to get built, and how do you fund that?
Craig?
Yeah, great question, Mike. So the major components are the solar, and we've got about 5 megawatts of solar siting opportunity. Let's just say we can get about half of that built. So that's about 2.5 megawatts of solar. The energy storage we're going to want to put in combination with that in order to provide the level of resilience that we're talking about is going to be somewhere around 2 megawatts, 8 megawatt hours of energy storage. And then in order to tie this all together, we have to upgrade the grid. So that's going to require help from Southern California Edison, or at least it's going to require their cooperation. And then the systems that tie it together, you call it the microgrid controller. There's lots of different names for these systems, but we like to just refer to it as monitoring communication control, because that's what these systems do. They monitor what's happening, they send signals back and forth, and then they ultimately control, is your energy storage, is it charging, is it discharging, where are all the switches set, are you isolating from the grid, are you kind of reestablishing connection to the larger grid, et cetera. Mike, to answer your question, I think the solar is going to cost somewhere around, 5 to 7 million, depending on exactly how much we are able to get down. The energy storage is probably going to cost right around $6 million, and then the monitoring communication control is going to cost about $2 million. If you add up those numbers, it comes out to about $15 million. That's the total cost. Uncle Sam, through tax credits, going to pay for tax credits and other tax benefits, going to pay for about a third of it, so you're down to about $10 million. And then the economic value of the energy and the demand charge management, some other value streams, that's going to pay for the majority of that, but there's probably going to be a gap of a couple of $1 million that's going to have to come from either foundations or some generous donors or through the California Energy Commission or some other type of government grant, because right now, unfortunately, resilience is not a quantifiable element. There's not some established valuation for resilience. So that piece of it is going to have a little bit of a gap, and we're going to have to come up probably with a couple of $1 million to pay for that gap, that resilience gap. But basically, total spend is about $15 million. About a third of that comes back almost immediately through tax benefits, and then the other 2/3, or most of the other 2/3, gets paid for through economic value of the energy, et cetera. And there probably will be a little bit of an economic gap. So I don't know, I hopefully answer your question.
Yeah. And by the way, we didn't talk about houses tonight. Obviously, all the houses in Montecito and elsewhere in Santa Barbara can all be islanded or interconnected as well. To island, which is what my house is, so my house never loses energy no matter what happens on the grid. It's solar with a combination of battery storage with other backup technologies. So if anybody wants to see that, by the way, feel free to contact the Academy, and I'll be happy to show you how that works, because I'll show you what a controller looks like in a more miniature version of what he's talking about on a microgrid version. And so don't anyone here tonight think that because you don't live on top of the Vaughns that you can't participate. There'll be numerous ways to participate, whether it's in your own house or in the way we put together the ultimate financing package for this project. Next question or comment?
I've been asking you for years about hydrogen, and
Thank you, Andy.
I'm very frustrated because it seems like there's this incredible opportunity to both use hydrogen as a storage mechanism, and nobody's talking about transportation. So with the Mirai and all the new fuel cell cars and the lack of hydrogen filling stations that can make this whole country viable. So hydrogen is one question, but the other question is, what's the possibility of expanding the desal plant and powering that with solar so we can have water and energy?
On the hydrogen, I'll take that one. The hydrogen question, yes, in the numbers he just gave you, you're probably talking about flow batteries and certain other conventional battery technologies. The future clearly is I drive a hydrogen vehicle, as you know, Andy, and having a single station here has its limitations, but it also brings hydrogen to our community. For those of you who are interested in how hydrogen plays a long-term role in energy independence, particularly the California Moonshot, and how it could play a role here as well using fuel cells, Ask us for that video. It's only 20 minutes long, the TED Talk I gave in Sacramento on the California moonshot, and it goes into the details of how hydrogen can be used. If we get off on that tonight, however, I'm concerned, as much as I love hydrogen, and some of you know 13 years ago I wrote a book with a major chapter on it. I've written a number of papers on it. So I'd love to talk about it, but I want to keep this tonight focused on the microgrid, and you can see from the way that what Craig does, why we're so happy to have him as a partner, because he's breaking it down to these little bite-sized nuggets, and even though 2 million might sound like a lot, I don't think that's a lot to build a resilient energy system for Montecito. So we want to focus on that tonight, but Andy, let's talk again afterwards. Anyone else out there with a question or a comment? Mike. Jerry.
Craig, hi. I want to talk about Edison a little bit, both on the positive side and the negative side. From past experience, we understood that they've been, and also with installers of renewable energy, that they've been resistant in terms of providing any economical distribution between local solar energy systems. And here you're talking about tying this all together. So one, I understand you're going to be down with them. How do we overcome this? And number two, there was a point where we at the Academy tried to get Edison to put one of its distributed renewable projects, pilot projects here in Santa Barbara, and the understanding was that they could spread the costs of that over all of their 5 million customers. Is that a conceivable scenario for bridging the gap in terms of the financing here?
Yeah, great question, Jerry. Edison is really afraid of this brave new energy world, and so are all the other big utilities, by the way, so Edison's not alone in this. The challenges for getting Edison and other big utilities to kind of understand how they're going to participate in this brave new world, how they can possibly make the same kind of money by opening up and doing creative things on their distribution grids that they currently and that will avoid a tremendous amount of investment in their transmission grids, which is great for us as ratepayers because the transmission grid is hugely expensive. But because it's expensive for us, it means they make a lot of money off of it. And so, they're very nervous about this distributed energy resources world, and that's the biggest barrier that we have to deal with. So the way to help them understand how to move into this brave new world and, feel like they have a future in it, is to show them that there are significant investment opportunities for the utilities to invest in their distribution grids, potentially to be one of the investors that is, investing in the solar and the energy storage and all these other assets that will get deployed out there. I don't know if I'm sure not everybody's familiar with how the utilities make money in California, but their primary driver for profitability is by making capital investments, meaning they have to invest in assets. That's how they drive their profits. That's a primary driver of profits for investor-owned utilities in California. So we've got to show them how they can make those investments and overcome a lot of that fear they have. One of the challenges working with the utilities is that when we'll be in there, we'll be talking with director level, maybe a VP or so here and there. But in order to move forward and for Edison to agree to move forward with this, it is going to be a board level decision. So if you're talking with a director, that director is going to bubble up to a VP, that VP is going to bubble up to a senior VP, right? And then you're going to get to the board level. So it's a challenge, but if we don't have the conversations, then we know what the answer is going to be, right? It's going to be a no. If we want to get to a yes, we've got to get this conversation started, and we got to show them how that future can pan out for them. And I will just say, we got tremendous assets right here. Charles and Jen, I mean, it just was so wonderful to hear everything they had to say, and hopefully there's some questions going in their direction too.
Let me just add, Jerry, on the issue of intent, if the people of Montecito didn't learn through the Thomas fire and debris flows a lesson of resilience, then the community's in worse shape than I want to believe. I mean, you only had to be evacuated, you only had to go without power, without cable, without gas, without water, with the failure of our water system, to know that resilience of our infrastructure is the answer to making our community habitable on a sustained and sustainable basis for the future.
I don't want to point out anybody in the rooms by name, but there are people here who know something about social impact investing bonds, and we will be looking towards putting some of those possibilities together for the community. And I believe what you'll find is that there's a number of ways the financing can occur, and we should be getting as much help as possible from every aspect. We got time for at least one more before I, please.
I'm just curious about, are there model grids around the country that have been very successful? Have they been implemented, and what can we learn from them?
The best one in California he's building right now.
You guys are missing a great opportunity to hear more from Jen, because she is a tremendous asset that y'all get the benefit from. So hopefully we get time for one more question. So there's a great project in San Diego gas and electric territory called the Borrego Springs Community Microgrid. That's the best example we have in California. Probably the best example we have around the country is the Long Island Community Microgrid, and that's a project that the Clean Coalition did in partnership with the utilities that serve all of Long Island, which is the Long Island Power Authority, it's a municipal utility, and PSEG Long Island, which is an investor-owned utility that they hired to operate the grid for them. You have to kind of deal with both the utilities out there. That brought in 15 megawatts of solar, 10 megawatts, 40 megawatt hours of energy storage, so a ton of these distributed energy resources, and it set the stage for 90 megawatts of wind, of offshore wind. That's the first offshore wind project in the United States. It's going to be off the coast of Long Island, and it's going to come and interconnect into the substation that we basically set up through the Long Island Community Microgrid project. We weren't planning for that. That was just a bonus gravy on top. So instead of just 15 megawatts of wind, 15 megawatts of solar, we got 15 megawatts of solar plus 90 megawatts of wind, and that was all enabled from a community microgrid project.
One more question back here.
Hi.
Before you do, so you left out Hunter's Point.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, but you're building, it's in process. Hunter Point is, Clean Coalition's up in San Francisco, and UCSD, University of California, San Diego, which is a freestanding microgrid and has been very successful 2 or 3 years.
We've been very interested in the solar and independence and personal resilience, and we've been looking at Tesla and what they've got to offer, and I'm very excited about what's going on right now with this here and today. And Charles, you brought up one thing about rebuilding in the creeks. I was wondering if the creeks, the way they broke their banks, they used to be 50 feet wide, now they're 450 feet wide. Is the outline of the creek now 450 feet wide, is that an anomaly? Is that going to be considered an anomaly? Or is that the new creek bank that you're going to have to build 50 feet away from in order to comply with planning and safety?
I would have to tell you that the answer to that question, which is an important question, isn't yet known. The county is deliberating very cautiously as the director of the Office of Emergency Services said, we have a constitution in the country that protects people's rights and so on. But it's a complex question. I think the bottom line is that if a resilient but safe structure can be built, it ought to be built. But we have to recognize that there are definitely going to be new areas, new places that are simply not buildable for single-family homes. Now, what we do with them is another issue. And as I said, there's been a lot of talk in Washington and California about shovel-ready projects and infrastructure. Well, Mother Nature did the digging. It's now a question of what we do with the hole that we're left to confront. And I think we all need to have input to that, and through our public officials and otherwise, and be vigilant about it so that the decision that's made as to what goes in those holes is the best decision for our community and for the future of our community.
Yeah, I just have 2 quick follow-ups. One is on the kind of floodplain mapping exercise. So as Charles alluded to, we don't yet know the answer to that. We're about 90 days out probably from knowing the answer to that. There's two very large-scale mapping exercises going on right now. The recent debris flow has completely reshaped the topography of the Montecito, Summerlin, Carpinteria area. And so there's two different kind of entities on the ground doing some mapping right now. One is FEMA. They're redrawing the floodplains. People that were not anywhere near the boundaries of a creek bed now have a creek flowing through the middle of their property and vice versa. So that's going on through FEMA, and then the county also has a consultant team that's out essentially redrawing property lines. Resetting stakes in the ground for defining where the parcel lines are because they've been buried and covered up, and creeks are a big piece of why that has changed. So I don't think we will know that for a little bit now. And then the second thing I wanted to follow up on was something that Craig said regarding kind of how do we get the buy-in from Southern California Edison, kind of the business model side of things. So as he alluded to, their profit-making machine is their capital assets. Most people don't realize that not many of the investor-owned utilities actually own many power plants, any generating facilities anymore. They've had to sell most of those off. They actually purchase most of the power that they sell to all of us as end-use customers. So where they really have the capital assets is in their delivery infrastructure, the power lines, the substations, everything that comes along with it. So if there's an argument to be made that their role is to help build out the connectors between the distributed energy sources, they can make about a 10% return on that. There's a lot of things that have to get approved and loops to jump through, and there's kind of equity considerations to keep in mind for their entire service area, but there is a potential benefit to them.
Thank you. And so we're going to, because it's time, we're going to wrap up. But if anybody wants to keep this conversation going, just write info@worldbusiness.org. Like I said, we can send you that 20-minute video. We can also send you a copy of this evening's discussion so that you can share it with others, so they can see what we're all thinking about. I want to also thank a couple people. I want to mention, again, Bob Perry, who's been mapping the county for the last 3 years, and that's where some of these slides came from. And without that effort, and ones that you haven't seen that you'll see in other presentations, we wouldn't have been able to make so much progress so quickly. I want to thank Matt Renner, who was the executive director for 4 years of the Academy, and who was willing to be this incredible bridge so we could partner up even more deeply with Clean Coalition. I want to thank Christy, and I want to thank Angelin, because without them, this meeting wouldn't have happened tonight. So thank you both very much. We are going to do, next month, we're going to do, the meeting is going to be on retail. Montecito, Coast Village Road, and Santa Barbara. The crisis in retail, a lot of people think it's because of homeless. Some people think it's because the landlords charge too much. Some people think it's because the electricity doesn't work well. Some people think it's because we haven't got a good planning program in place. That's a conversation we need to have if we're going to think globally and act locally. So watch for an email to tell you when that's going to come up. We had a date picked, Christy, and the reason I'm not announcing it is because Craig is asking us if we can juggle it because he'd like to come to that. So we're going to go back to getting the date, and please watch for it in your emails. And if they're, Judy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight, and thank you to our host, the El Encanto.
I actually was going to tell you the date and time, but now I'm not. That was why I came up, just to remind you. But it will be sometime, very soon, about a month from now. Watch for our email. Stay connected. We're really working hard on making this community strong, and we're really needing every one of you. And I thank each person who spoke on the panel. I thank you, Jina, for coming, and I think that our resilience starts from within and will work outside of us. Come together, be kind to one another, and enjoy this beautiful place that we've been given. I know that all of us feel that way, but we have to remember that every day. So we look forward to seeing you again next month, and have a lovely evening.